Welcome to this episode of Our Quest. This is Dimple Mehta, and today we would talk about how healing the heart helps in pursuing our growth. So, we're going to dive into that discussion today, and I'm truly grateful to you for taking out the time to listen to these podcasts. I hope this one further contributes towards your growth. Please do subscribe to the show so that you get the latest episodes first. If you like this episode, give us a quick rating or review on Apple Podcast. That helps the episode organically reach more people who might find it useful and beneficial. You may also screenshot and share it on Instagram. Tag us at dimple.ourquest. More people can then listen and benefit from these. Joining us today for this amazing, heartfelt discussion is Melany Oliver, who is an intuitive life coach specializing in emotional healing coaching in Dubai, UAE. We are also going to understand and learn from Melany's interesting story and journey. Welcome to the show, Melany. Thank you for gracing us with your presence here.
Thank you for inviting me on. I'm really happy to be here today with you, Dimple.
Equally happy. So before I start shooting questions at you, let's first hear your story. What's your journey?
Sure. So I was born in Brazil. I'm half Brazilian, half English. I was raised in Dubai, though. I think the beginning of my journey really had a big impact in terms of how I became a healer and all the work that I do now. So I'd like to share a little bit about that, if that's okay. So in Brazil, I'm from the northeast of Brazil, which is in Bahia, and it's a very occult, eclectic culture. So I was introduced from a very early age to like witch doctors, and I used to go to see mediums to get my energy cleansed and go see a spirit doctor and things like that. So I already grew up with immersed in this holistic therapies and alternative therapy, and I guess you can say spirituality field. So naturally, when I started to have issues of depression and self-sabotaging patterns, suicidal ideation, and drug addictions and things like that, I immediately went to spirituality, because in my head that's what healing was about. In Brazil, when I had nightmares, for example, as a child, I wasn't taken to a psychologist. I was taken to the witch doctor.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happened with me. I never even thought about going to a psychologist. So when I started to have issues in my early teens, because I grew up in Dubai, whenever I would go back to Brazil, I would go to these spiritual centers, and then I would go get my energy cleansed, go get crystal healing, go see the psychic doctors and things like that. And I always noticed that I felt a little bit better, but it didn't quite really shift the pattern. And I did spend 10 years doing all sorts of different energy healing and alternative therapies. So much so that I actually went on to study holistic and complementary therapies at university.
Wow.
In the University of Westminster. So I did study, aromatherapy, reflexology, what else? Environmental stress.
That's so broad.
Yeah, we did do counseling as well, and lifestyle, and all sorts of. Basically, it was all based around alternative therapies, naturopathy, and things like that. So when I started my career, I started using all the tools that I learned, not only throughout my childhood, but also at uni. But in my mid-20s, I realized that things still weren't changing.
Mm-hmm.
I was still depressed. I was still having suicidal ideation, and I was still in a lot of addictions and toxic relationships, and I couldn't understand why. I had spent so many years healing and using all these tools and aromatherapy and natural stuff and energy healing after energy healing.
Still something's missing.
And nothing was changing, and I couldn't figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Until I discovered that it was emotions. I actually had my voice analyzed. I was so desperate. I went to get my voice analyzed. I said, I've been doing this for 10 years. Anyway, long story short, he told me that I still had a lot of deep childhood emotional wounds that I had not healed.
And he got it from your voice?
He was spot on everything. I was shocked.
Wow.
Actually, he's incredible. And it was from that moment that I took what he said to heart, because it was true. I couldn't deny it, and it was something that I had never talked about to anyone, all the childhood abuse. And so I took it to heart, and I started doing more inner child work and learning about emotions and learning how to process emotions. And then what I found was that the more that I did that, the better that I felt. And the more that I healed my emotions and processed my emotions, my patterns started to change.
Wow.
So, for example, I used to smoke. I was a
Oh.
heavy smoker and drinker. And I kept trying to stop, because obviously, how can I be a holistic healer and then I'm smoking and drinking and all of that? And I would always go back to it. So one day I decided, I'm not going to stop. Yeah, I'm just going to continue, but I'm going to focus on healing my wounds. And I noticed that the desire to smoke started to reduce
Automatically.
It was a side effect of healing, you can say. And then one day I realized that I hadn't smoked for 3 weeks.
Wow.
And then the 3 weeks turned into 3 months, and I realized, wow, I have no desire to engage in that addiction anymore. And it's been like 10 years.
Lovely.
So
Yeah.
and then the same thing happened with drinking. It's been 7 years, or maybe 8 years now. I don't have the desire to drink. It doesn't align with me anymore. And so yeah, the more that I healed myself emotionally and really focusing on my childhood traumas, I started to heal myself as a side effect. My patterns, toxic relationships, and self-sabotaging patterns. And on top of that, I no longer had suicidal ideations and deep depression, and I started to naturally feel happier and all of that. So that's it in a nutshell.
Isn't that awesome? And who better to talk about healing than somebody who has healed herself? Yeah?
Yeah, thank you.
Now that you've already shared your story, which is already pretty inspiring, especially to the people who are struggling with quitting smoking and drinking, they need to address the bigger problems lying
Yeah,
ahead, right?
100%.
So, how can people identify whether they need healing or not? Sometimes we just are not aware whether we need healing or not.
True. I personally believe that everyone needs healing.
Mhm.
It's just that some people have deeper emotional wounds or
Mhm.
more wounds than others,
Mhm.
and we disguise it in different ways. But if you have, addiction, any sort of addiction problem, and when I say addiction, I don't just mean drug addiction. It could be, you could be addicted to work. You could be a workaholic,
Yeah.
and that's an avoidance of a deeper emotional wound. The perfectionist in you, because you're constantly criticized by your parent, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
right? Um, um, yeah, so a lot of different types of addictions, not necessarily drug addiction. It could be you're addicted to people pleasing. That's a fawn trauma response, which again stems from childhood trauma, but health issues. A lot
Yeah.
of people don't realize that. I mean, I personally believe that all health issues are due to suppressed emotional wounds.
And now even doctors say that many of the health issues are psychosomatic, yeah?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct, and also inherited.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know you're into conscious parenting and all of that, and the wounds that our parents don't heal get passed on to us.
That's so true.
Yeah, and
So
because
true.
we're looking for a connection, a child will pick any connection. So they would rather pick a wounded connection than have no connection. So that's
Absolutely.
how we take on, our parents' emotional wounds. But yeah, so addictions, health issues, if you tend to self-sabotage, if you have negative self-talk, mental health issues, yeah, if you're constantly repeating a negative pattern, if you have a block in certain areas of your life, that's something that you can look at, because that's either an emotional wound or a negative belief. But I believe that all negative beliefs stem from emotional wounds.
Could be so right. And I've looked at it from that perspective. But now when you're saying about it, maybe it makes
Yeah.
absolute sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, with health issues, I've worked with a number of clients who had severe health issues. Some of them were considered to be incurable. And yet, when we worked on the emotions, they healed. So I had a client that I worked with a long time ago. She had lupus. and this is considered to be incurable. And I can't diagnose, by the way. I'm just sharing. I just work with people's emotions, and I help them process their emotions. And I shared this with her as well. She was doing other things, like she changed her lifestyle, but with her, we were working on her deep emotional wounds. And basically, her mother had committed suicide, and then a year later, her twin sister committed suicide. So she had deep grief, and she could not accept their passing. And basically, she created a belief that she also wanted to die. She could not enjoy her life moving forward. She couldn't see herself happy and all of that. So we really worked on accepting the grief and accepting both, her mother and her twin sisters passing, and some other, emotional wounds. And within 8 months, she was completely cured.
Wow. And
Yeah.
she must have been living with those problems for like years and years.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And now she's super happy, she's joyful, and she can remember her sister and her mother with joy and not with pain
Yeah.
and grief. She
Yeah.
remembers the good times. And I'm not sure if you're into, spirituality, but she can feel their presence a lot more now, with joy rather than sadness, which is amazing, right?
I am very much into spirituality, and I can totally feel and see, even while you're talking about it, I can see that that person must have changed from somebody who's so stuck in the pain or problems
Yeah.
that she was having to somebody who's now liberated, probably,
Yes,
and
exactly.
living
She's
a
free.
normal life. Yeah.
Gave
Yeah.
herself permission, because this is one thing with grief. I find that people feel guilty to be happy once their loved ones have passed,
Yeah.
but we're the ones that are creating these false beliefs, because surely they would want us to be happy, right?
Surely, surely.
you know I have another couple of examples of stress.
Mm-hmm.
I had two clients that had nervous breakdowns. They both acted out, not acted out, I should say. It came out in different ways. So in one of the clients, he kept experiencing blackouts,
Okay.
and the other client, her nervous system actually started to break down,
Okay.
and she started to lose the sensation on her skin, so
Again,
on her,
something neurological, or
yeah,
yeah,
so on
yeah.
her nerves and then it started to spread down her body slowly, both due to stress.
Wow.
Which I should say that stress is an accumulation of unprocessed emotions.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I thought stress is because of the kind of lifestyle we are living these days.
I see it differently. So I see it as an accumulation of unprocessed emotion. So something happens in your life, you don't process it, you push it down. And then something else happens and you don't process that emotion, you push it down. And then they'll come to a point, it's kind of like a pressure cooker, and every time an emotion shows up, you just turn up the pressure. And, you know, there's that threshold.
And you're all bottled up, and then you suddenly
You
blast.
either explode
Yeah.
and you start, getting symptoms such as health issues, or you start to react. So you start to be short-tempered, get angry a lot, irritable, and all sorts. So in both cases, again, I worked with helping them. They were both different. So one of them, he had a lot of shame, and he felt his company was failing, basically, and he had a lot of shame, and he didn't want to face that, you
Um,
know. So and humiliation, fear of humiliation,
Rejection,
all
failure.
of that in
Yeah, yeah,
society,
yeah,
looking at him.
yeah,
And
yeah.
but we managed to work through that beautifully, and he did close the company. He managed to pay everyone off. He did go on to be very successful now. But it was just a life lesson. People fail at things sometimes, but he couldn't cope with that emotion.
So coping with that gracefully. That's what he
Yes.
did with you.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so after that, disappeared. Blackouts completely disappeared.
Wow.
And with this other client with a nervous breakdown, same thing. After 3 months of working, helping her work through different emotions, and there was a few different things in her case. She managed to get all her nervous system back. The sensations on her face and the arms and everything came back. And in both cases, the doctor said it was just stress and there was nothing that they could do about it.
It's incredible when you can solve such big problems in people, because otherwise you just end up going to a doctor, probably popping pills or
Mm,
going through other, long chains of medical treatments where you're actually not reaching to the roots, which you are
correct.
correctly highlighting. I mean, it's making sense to me now. Even I didn't think that stress is out of suppressed emotions. I used to think stress is because we are overworking or living a, much busier life and things like that.
Yeah.
But the way you present it, it makes total sense that it's actually our emotions which we are not addressing, which is leading up
Correct.
to bigger problems. And then we are going to wrong places for treatment and
Yes.
popping pills and getting treatments and still not treating those
Yeah,
emotions. Yeah.
correct. And then the sad thing is that people want to take the pill, right? Because it's a quick fix, but
Easier.
it doesn't
Yeah.
fix the problem. And then when you do that, the issues just get worse, right? You get more health issues, and then you take more pills, and it's just it's a horrible cycle to
Vicious
get
circle.
into.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just wish that people would have the courage to look within, to
Yes.
actually face their emotions, because if they just did that, they could resolve so many different issues, and permanently
Yeah. From the roots.
from the root.
So, what is it that we can do once we have figured out that probably everything about us is not right? Probably we need some sort of help. Probably we need some sort of healing. Once we come into that realization, what can we do to heal ourselves from past traumas or bad experiences?
So, firstly, I think the first part of healing is always awareness, right? And I think that, I mean, people are becoming more aware of emotions and the impact of emotions. Um, so, to do some reading around that, because people need to understand how much these emotions impact. Um, our health, our life, our relationships, everything basically. So maybe read some books. That's always the first step. To have a,
Totally.
or go do some courses or something like that, or just like I said, get educated in emotions, emotional processing. The second is to realize that you are at cause of your issue,
Yeah.
but you're also the solution,
Yeah.
right? The solution is not out there. Um, and the third would be you have to have the desire to heal. And by desiring to heal, you have to desire to feel your emotions, which most people don't want to do.
Sometimes it's not pleasant. Yeah.
Yeah, most of the time it's not, right? Um, and if you can get past those two things, like really desiring to feel, that's going to help you so much. Um, and processing your emotions. The fourth step would be to actually sit and feel your emotions. Now, this is the tricky part because most of us were not taught. I wasn't taught.
I
I
wasn't either.
Yeah, I learned the hard way, like many years later. So I would encourage people, especially in the beginning of your journey, to get help. If you want to get results and you want to get results fast, just invest in a good healing coach, someone that knows what they're doing, someone that focuses on emotions, not in the mind. Emotions have to be felt in your body, and it's an experiential thing. um, so yeah, so the fourth or fifth, whatever it is, get help. After that, once you've gone through a lot of your once you've gone through some of these processes, yeah, there are things that you'll be able to do by yourself, at home. But yeah, one thing that I wanted to share is that when it comes to um, doing this type of work, it is really about accepting truth. When you're processing your emotion, you're actually processing, well, firstly, letting go of false ideas and beliefs that you had based on the emotional wound, and then you're accepting the truth of who you are, maybe accepting the truth of what happened in your childhood. Like in my case, that actually, yeah, I was abused and my mother didn't love me, because if she did, she wouldn't abuse me, right? So and this is actually a key one I find with people, because all of our beliefs, all of our patterns stem from your childhood. I don't care who
Totally
you
agreed.
are.
Yes.
And even if you had a happy childhood,
You can still have issues.
yes, and I
Yes.
would still encourage you. And by the way, my parents, I had a good, quote unquote, good childhood. I went to a good school. I had food on the table. On the from if you looked at it from the outside, my father did everything to provide for us. Even my mother, um, even with all the traumas that I experienced for her, she took me to ballet. You know what I mean. So from on the outside, it would look that I had a happy childhood. I had everything that I could ask for. All my materialistic needs were met. However, the emotional needs, on the other hand, and this is where the emotional wounds come from,
Yeah.
right? And the reason why I'm emphasizing this and sharing my stories, because so many clients come to me who are suffering from depression, toxic relationships, health issues, I don't know what else. And then as soon as I ask about their childhood and their relationship with their parents, they immediately go into denial. Oh no, I had a happy childhood.
Probably nobody ever took out the time to actually see what went wrong there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's shocking. Like I remember I worked with a lovely lady who I worked with her for probably about 6 or 8 months. I can't remember. But I knew that she was abused based on her patterns. It was classic. This is classic psychology, you know. And she wouldn't tell me what happened. And literally, I think it was on the third month, you know, she
Wow.
finally opened up and said, my mother used to hit me. She used to, and I knew that from the beginning, but she was in complete denial.
Denial. Yeah.
And she said, my mother used to, you know, verbally abuse me, this, that, and the other. And then she immediately flipped and she looked me straight in the eye. She's like, but I know she loves me.
Defensive.
And so complete defensive and denial.
Yeah.
Did not want to acknowledge that actually her mother didn't love her.
Yeah.
And this, obviously, I know this is such a hard truth for any child, even an adult with their wounded inner child, to accept.
Yeah.
People do not want to accept their childhood wounds, and they're so scared to point at their parents and say, actually, you hurt me. You know, because then the parents, especially if they, like in my case, if you got everything provided for, well, you know, how ungrateful can you be? We gave you everything.
It's completely the same in our culture. From where I come from, it's as if you do not have the right to raise a finger towards your parents because they have spent on you, they have raised you,
Yes.
they have, you know, given you things. Then how can you
Correct.
be ungrateful?
How dare you?
But what if they have given you things which are not
Wounded
healthy?
you.
Yeah, probably they have wounded you. I mean, yeah.
And this is the biggest issue that I see.
Yeah.
So get out of denial. Don't be scared to point the finger. And by the way, I'm not saying point the finger and blame and stay in blame, but we need to point the blame where it belongs.
Exactly.
And hold them accountable.
Yeah.
Whether they take responsibility and hold themselves accountable for what they did, that's, in terms of your own healing, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because that's on them.
Yes.
Right? And that's
yes.
their journey and their healing journey, which, you know, a lot of parents I see are not capable of doing that. But in terms of you must put blame where it belongs. Yeah, but not
Address
stay in
and
blame.
acknowledge, maybe. Yeah.
Obviously, at the end goal is forgiveness.
Yes.
But the inner child is still hurt, and the inner child needs to be able to point the finger and say, actually, you hurt me. You know.
Yeah. Probably just having that right to be able to accept that you hurt me.
Yes.
Can heal a lot itself.
Because it's validating to the child.
Yeah, I was looking for the word. It's validating it.
Because they've been invalidated their whole life and been told to shut up, to push, don't, you know, big boys don't cry, or little girls or big girls don't cry, or whatever. And they've had this conditioning and programming to shut down their emotions. They're not allowed to feel. Yeah. And when you're not allowed to feel your emotions, you are denying that little child's reality.
That's so true.
And that's traumatic.
That's so true.
And yeah, there's so many other like layers. I'm happy to discuss all of that.
When I deal with parents who are my clients who come with issues with their kids, it's actually those parents who have their childhood wounded, and they are passing it on to their kids, and then expecting their kids to be a fantasy version of theirs.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right in pointing out that it all goes back to their childhood wounds, where they were not able to heal, where they were not able to address it with their parents.
And so what the parents are looking for is to have their childhood wounds that were not met by their children.
Absolutely.
And that's not fair.
That's not fair.
You know? And it's not fair, and that's like, as you just mentioned, that's what creates generational wounding, right? That's how they pass it on. And we have to be, if you're conscious and if you're listening to this, or if you're becoming aware, then we have to be, sadly, the ones to point it out and break the pattern. And if you are that person, just know that you're going to get a lot of backlash, and you have to be willing to face it.
Yeah.
Face it with humility. Face it with knowing in your heart that you're doing this out of love, and that you're doing this out of truth, and to break the pattern. You're not doing this to blame or to break the family.
Yeah.
But sadly, that will and may happen, like in my
Like a
case.
side effect, yes, it can.
This was my case, so that's why. And most people are not willing to go to the length, that length.
Because it's not an easy process.
Oh
It's
no.
not. It's not. Yeah.
It's very hard. It's very challenging. You have to have a lot of courage,
Yeah.
and you have to really want to heal and and live in truth and integrity with who you are. The only reason I made that decision because for many years I managed my mother, but then I came to the realization is that I'm actually still allowing abuse.
By doing that, yeah.
By allowing her to abuse, I wasn't triggered anymore. She couldn't trigger me anymore, right? Because I knew exactly her games. I knew what she was doing, but I just because I had done my own healing, it wouldn't trigger me. But then I just had this realization one day, like, wow, I'm actually allowing her to still abuse me. I'm just not getting triggered. And that was the shift for me. Like, that's it. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be based on love and respect. Actually, you don't even have to love me, but you just have to respect me, you know? Otherwise, I can't have this relationship because then it's not loving for me.
Yeah.
If I don't love myself, then this is the message that I'm giving out energetically, emotionally to everyone. So then that's what you
Then everybody
attract.
gets to not love me. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah.
Like you mentioned, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick fix. It's not a shortcut. It takes a lot of courage, lot of efforts, and definitely you need somebody to help you with it. I mean, if you think that you
Correct.
can just do it all by yourself, probably not. What if you
No.
lose the direction? Yeah.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
you definitely need somebody to help you. How can that healing help us grow? Once we decide to embark on that journey, I ask you for help, heal me.
Yeah.
How can that healing help in a person's growth?
Well, firstly, I mean, the healing path, I see the healing path and the spiritual path like almost the same, where because it's both about truth and about getting to know yourself,
Yeah.
right? So the more that you heal yourself, the more that you will know yourself and know who you really are, because most people walking around today, they're not their real selves.
So true.
We put on masks. We
Live in denials.
yeah, live in denial, and we feed certain addictions. And so healing will really help you to know your true self and will liberate you to actually be your true self. And I believe that this is what most people want and secretly desire.
I think so too.
Yeah, but they're so afraid of, firstly, their parents and their society, and what people will think of who they are. And because they were not loved and not allowed to be loved for who they are, that fear is still there,
Yeah.
in that little inner child.
Yeah, I think there's so many should be's. There's
Yes.
so many should be's that we have to follow right from the small age till now, till later.
Correct.
And we somewhere get lost in those should be's.
Yeah.
Because you have to do that. You
Yeah.
should be doing this. You must, you
Yes.
must, you must.
You have to act in this way, and and also like family obligations and societal obligations and things like that. So in terms of healing helping you grow, you will not only get to know yourself better, but it will increase your self-esteem, your self-worth. You will have stronger boundaries. You will have more clarity about who you are and what you want in life, and you won't be scared to disappoint people. Not that you're doing it intentionally to hurt people, but you'll be true to yourself.
Yeah. I think you owe it to yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because this is your life at the end of the day. It's not their life.
Yeah.
And I believe that this is why a lot of people get to the end of their life filled with regrets, because they weren't themselves and they weren't true to themselves. They were living all the shoulds and have tos and all of the obligations, and then they end up filled with resentment and feeling unhappy about life, and they don't know why.
And probably they realize all of this way too late in life.
Oh yeah, way too late. So it will bring you more joy, more love, more fulfillment. You'll have more compassion, not only for yourself, but for others. And one thing that I noticed as well, like in my own journey, the more that I healed myself, the less reactive I was towards people. And then you don't take people's behavior personally.
Yeah, they don't trigger you.
It doesn't matter, because you start to see through a lot of people's behavior. And this just brings you, it's just, it's a more peaceful way, to live, because you're not, yeah, you're not reactive, you're not reacting to life or to people all the time.
And your peace is in your control.
Yes,
Others don't get
correct.
to ruin it. Yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you just feel more connected to yourself.
Yeah.
You feel more connected to God, to life.
Yeah.
Um, and I believe that the more that you heal, the more that you will live your life to the fullest.
So if somebody has worked a lot and put in those efforts and try to heal from the past traumas, past toxicities that they could have gone through, is there a way how we can prevent trauma or toxic events in the future?
Yeah. Just as I was talking about the pressure cooker
Yeah,
before,
yeah.
deal with your emotions as soon as they come up. Don't wait for next month, for when your kids are in school, for you need to deal with your emotions immediately. If you're triggered, deal with it. Because what tends to happen, you don't. That's the truth. We say we will deal with it later, but then it just accumulates again, and then that toxicity, emotional toxicity builds up, and then you explode, you get overwhelmed, and you just need to deal with your stuff immediately. And this is why I do my work every day, my inner work every day, and I do, practice what I preach. When I'm triggered, I deal with it immediately. Um, because also that's when you have access to that wound. Whereas if you push it down, when you come back to it a month or 6 months down the line, you're going to have to dig that up, and all your defenses that you put up to suppress that wound, you're going to have to process all those emotional justifications of suppressing it as well. So you're actually making life more difficult for yourself when you don't deal with your emotions immediately.
Yeah.
So that's one. Two, you need to live in truth and in integrity with who you are. And the more that you can do that, and this is another challenging one, because most people are afraid, to speak their truth. They're afraid to live in truth. For example, they will say yes when actually they want to say no.
Yeah, it's such a big
That's
problem with so many people.
And this is such a simple thing.
Yeah.
And yet they will still sacrifice themselves for, because it's a friend, because whatever, they fear rejection, or they fear the friend will not like them, and maybe the friend may get triggered, but that's also their trigger,
Yeah.
right? They have to, if they don't respect your no, then are they really a friend?
Something to think about. Yeah.
And same with family members. So, and because what you're doing then is you're giving your power away to that person, and you're feeding their addiction, you're feeding their emotional addiction, and then you're taking something from it, which is a false sense of being accepted,
Yeah.
which is not real. And then that's a toxicity, that's an emotional toxicity that you're taking in, and eventually you're going to end up resentful, you're going to end up drained.
And then you're
you
going to
know
blame the other
and then
person
you
that that
yes,
person did that to
yeah.
me. Yeah.
And so living in truth,
Yeah.
say no, let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. And look after your own needs first. And people think that's selfish, and I don't mean this in a selfish way. You know how they say put your gas mask on first before you can help someone
Yeah.
else?
Yeah.
The same thing with emotions. Look after your own emotional needs first, and then you'll be giving and serving from a full cup, not from when you're already drained, and that's also not good for both of you, right? So yeah, living in integrity with yourself, with your needs, with your values, following your passions and desires. This is a big one, because again, you're going to end up drained, tired, resentful, unhappy, and all of that. Um, and yeah, just learning to be more loving with yourself and others.
You first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, even, I mean, I would say you first. And when you, in this, with what we mentioned before about saying yes to someone when you actually mean no, when you say yes to that person, when you actually mean no, you're actually being unloving to them,
Yeah.
because you're feeding their addiction.
Yeah.
So you're being their enabler,
Yeah.
and their, whether it's whatever their addiction is, so you're being unloving to them and to yourself in the same moment. So I think that people need to learn a lot about love, and about what love really is, because people think that, for example, in this case, it means that I care. But actually, no, it doesn't. You're not caring about yourself and your own needs in that moment, and you're not caring about the other person. Because if you truly loved that other person, you
You
would
will
call
actually
them
say what,
out.
yeah, you would say what you mean.
This
Yeah.
is, and you'll be your true self with them.
Yeah.
Because then otherwise, you're just being a facade. You're pretending because you want to get their acceptance or whatever it is that you want to get from them.
As simple as you make it sound, I'm sure the efforts required are not that simple. It takes a lot to reach the state where you're directing us to lead. Uh, how can a person grow once they have healed their hearts?
Um, Really, it's about desire.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the way that I see it is desire is your soul's will. Yeah, it's really the power of your soul. And for me, I can talk about my own personal journey now. Where I am now, my desire now is to really to get to know God, to connect more with God, um, and to develop in love. Because what I learned, even though I spent 10 years doing all these courses on Reiki and Access and I don't know what theta and psychic abilities, talking to animals, what I realized is that spirituality is not about that.
So
You know,
true.
it's got nothing to do with that. It's not about knowledge in your head. It's not about psychic abilities or the occult and mysticism. And I think that that's where most people are today, because the healing market has become very commercial.
Oh, yes.
And this new age spirituality is taking people on the wrong path.
And they get lost in the maze.
Correct. Which is my next point. They get lost, and they think that by knowing more, they're developing their spirituality.
Which is not the case.
This is so not true. The only way you're going to grow on a soul level is if you do your inner work, is if you process your emotions, because emotions, I believe, is the language of the soul, and I believe it's also God's language.
Yeah.
Yeah, God speaks to you through your heart, not through your head.
Yeah.
You don't hear, a voice in your head, and it's through emotions. And they say, I don't know if you've heard this. There's a saying that to enter the kingdom of God, your heart has to be as light as a feather.
Yeah.
You can't enter there when you're carrying resentment and wounds, and you've got your ego and denial and arrogance and all of that. So it's really about developing in love, and the only way you can do that is firstly by healing your emotional wounds. By understanding what love really is, because I think this is a huge problem on earth. I think that's why the earth is the way that it is now,
Could be.
because we lack love.
Yeah.
We lack love within ourselves and for others.
Yeah.
So that's a big one, to really have the desire to develop in love within yourself and for others and for the world, for the environment, for example, and for the animals and all of that. To desire truth, because God is infinite, right? So there's always going to be more truths that we can learn. So it's really a thirst and having a passionate desire for truth, for God, for love. And this is how you're going to continue to develop. And just know that it is an experiential thing. It's not an intellectual thing. It's not something that you're going to learn from a book or from, okay, there are books that can teach you concepts.
But those are just tools that can help you.
Correct.
Yes.
Like I mentioned in the beginning, like the first part of healing or any growth is awareness.
Yes.
So the first part is always intellectual, but the real application of spiritual growth is experiential. It's visceral. It's an emotional experience. So yeah, having this deep, passionate desire for truth, for God, for love, and knowing that I believe that we're here on earth to learn about love. Mm-hmm. To develop in love. Mm-hmm. And the more that we develop in love, the more that our soul grows and expands and evolves on a real soul level permanently. And as a side effect, you're going to get all these psychic abilities and this, that, and the other, which is funny, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
You don't have to try. Like it's not a trying thing. You don't have to try hard. You don't have to force it. What I'm saying is it's about a pure, sincere desire that has to come from your heart.
Thank you so much, Melany, for saying all those deep things with so much of simplicity, so much of ease, and They're such goal-like thoughts that you've shared. For the people who would understand,
Yeah.
yeah. And by God, we don't mean a particular religion.
No.
Every religion speaks about connecting with the divine, and I think you meant the
Yes.
same, that when you are actually looking for growth after healing your hearts, you're ultimately following the biggest desire of your soul, which is of connecting with the divine,
Yes.
understanding the language of love and purity for which we
100%.
are here. And for the people who have embarked on that journey and learned that, can vouch for this, that experience is the best experience, the best bliss they could experience in their life.
A
Yeah.
1000%. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why I mentioned that is because I had that experience and it changed my life. And oh, it's making me cry.
See that.
Sorry. Because not many people have had this experience.
Only the blessed people get to go through that journey.
And it was just between me and God, and once it's in your heart, no one can take that from you.
It's 100% yours, your authentic
And
self.
it's not, and you don't believe there's a God. I know there is a God now.
Yeah.
And I experienced what true love is. Even with my wounds, even with my faults, I received love. And that's why and I think what most people are seeking is God at the end of the day, that connection to know that they're loved, that God loves them, that there is hope, there is healing, there is joy, there's so much more beauty on the other side of healing if you only take the time to actually heal your wounds. Yes, I know that it's not fair. I know that it wasn't your fault, the trauma wasn't your fault, but your healing is your responsibility, and it will teach you a lot about love, a lot about yourself, about so many things. So yeah, I just really want people to have the courage and not to look at everything that you're going to lose. I lost my family, I lost everything, but I gained so much spiritually. And when you have this connection, yeah, no one can take that from you. And then you have peace in your heart, you'll have love, and you'll have more clarity, direction, joy, and beauty. And there's just so much that people can't see yet because they're so deeply wounded. But yeah, I think I'm rambling now, but yeah, I just wish people that would have more courage to face themselves.
It's beautiful what you just said.
You have been listening to Our Quest. Thank you for your time again. If you haven't already, please give us a quick rating on Apple Podcast, and don't forget, you can follow us on Instagram or share your screenshot of the podcast and tag us. Links in description. See you next week, same time, same plate.